What's up, everyone? Jason coming to you solo this week to discuss the fourth full-length album from Turnstile. If you're unfamiliar with Turnstile, they're a hardcore punk band from Baltimore, Maryland. And at this point, I do use the term hardcore pretty loosely, as the band has definitely evolved into something different entirely. And that's not to say that's a bad thing. So their current lineup consists of vocalist Brendan Yates, who also plays percussion and keyboards, Daniel Fang on the drums, Franz Lyons on the bass, and Pat McCrory on the lead guitar. This is also the first album to feature new guitarist Meg Mills, who replaced longtime rhythm guitarist Brady Ebert. Also worth noting, this was the first Turnstile album to be produced by the band's singer and frontman Brendan Yates. To accompany this release, the band also released a visual film that premiered at the 2025 Tribeca Film Festival and in select theaters on June 5th. I had actually hoped to catch that release in the theaters, but sometimes life gets in the way. I didn't get that opportunity. So anyways, to say that the expectations for this album were high would be a major understatement. The band are following 2021's critically acclaimed Glow On, which earned the band 3 Grammy nominations. And for me personally, Glow On has since gone on to become one of my all-time favorite albums. That said, let's get into this new album. Never Enough is 14 songs, 45 minutes, making it the longest Turnstile album to date. They open it with the title track, Never Enough. And this is definitely an interesting way to open the album. We get hit with the synthesizers almost immediately, accompanied by Brendan's crooning shoegaze-style vocals. However, we do get a little burst of energy when that main riff kicks in, letting you know that the band's hardcore roots are still there, albeit hiding under layers and layers of atmosphere. At the 2.5 minute mark, we also get hit with a really beautiful guitar solo. The band also makes what seems like another odd choice, adding nearly a minute of atmospheric sound effects to close out the track. And just when you think you're about to nod off, you get some nice percussion that's leading you right into that second track, Soul. And that's spelled S-O-L-E. This has much more of the classic Turnstile feel to it. Again, it's hardcore punk at its roots, but Brendan's spacey vocals and the whimsical guitar leads really set it apart from the other bands that are in that genre. You almost feel like you've been teleported back to the 80s throughout parts of this song. From there, we get into the track I Care. So I was actually getting ready for work the first time I listened to this song, which is not typically when I'm at my happiest, like most of us. This song, however, really ended up changing my entire mood, and it kind of set the vibe for my whole day. Even found myself dancing a little bit, which is something that I absolutely don't do, but that's just a testament to the vibe that this song creates. This song is also one of many moments on this album where you can hear some unexpected influences, such as The Police. You'll definitely hear more of that as you get deeper into this album. The next track is Dreaming, one of the coolest riffs on the album, paired with some trumpets and saxophones, and it closes out with a quick little breakdown. Really fun track. And then from there, we get into Light Design. This is another one where the synths give it this very 80s vibe, and the accompanying guitars make you want to hop on the nearest surfboard that you can find. The next track from there is Dull, and this song illustrates to me what Turnstile does best. They keep things simple. If you listen to Turnstile's music, they typically don't overcomplicate things. Their song structures are very simple, almost caveman-like, and repetition is their friend, and they've never been afraid to embrace that, because what they do is build a foundation with these very simplistic songs, but then they add all of these layers to it, which really takes it to another level, and it's kind of what's allowed them to break through to this much wider audience than your typical hardcore punk band. So the next song is Sun Shower. The beginning of this track is probably as close as you're going to get to OG Turnstile at this point. It starts out pretty straightforward hardcore punk, albeit with lots of synths and reverb to spice it up. But this one takes an especially strange turn just before the 2-minute mark, and we get kind of progressive here. And much to my surprise, we get a flute solo to close this track out, which somehow works surprisingly well and leads nicely into the next track, which is Look Out For Me. I could be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure this has got to be the longest track that Turnstile's ever recorded, clocking in at over 6 minutes. To put that into perspective, that's the equivalent of at least 3, maybe even 4 of their usual length songs. This one is pretty fun, though. It starts with the standard Turnstile formula with a fun little riff and some shouty hardcore vocals. But when we get to the 3-minute mark, we get into what almost sounds like Jane's Addiction for a bit before we get into this weird synth-filled trance. We do start to get some light percussion to break us out of it, though. But this is definitely a bit of an odd song, especially when compared to previous Turnstile albums. But this song is placed directly in the middle of the album, which does end up serving as sort of like an intermission. Also, I can really see how this particular track would play into the visual elements that we're going to see once we get to see that film. From there, we get into Ceiling, which is just a quick little 1-minute, 13-second track. Kind of serves as a bridge back to the more energetic tracks. So that takes us right into Seeing Stars. Definitely a big chunk of funk in this song, which I am not mad at all. This is the most prevalent that the bass has been in the mix throughout the whole album, and it is quite welcome. Again, while the song structures remain really simple, the band really make these songs when they add all the bells and whistles. For instance, the solos on this album are just absolutely beautifully executed. I definitely think that Pat McCrory has grown as a guitarist since the last album. And it's also worth noting that Hayley Williams of Paramore offers backing vocals for this track. From here, we get into the next track, which is Birds. And here we go. After a lengthy detour, we're back to the hardcore elements again. The band did do a good job of paying attention to the pacing here, because I think one more of those kind of mid-tempo songs would have really halted the momentum on this album. But they brought it back right here. This is a fun little Turnstile banger. Definitely one of my favorites on the album. And then from there, we get into Slow Dive. Another one of my favorite tracks. Just Meat and Potatoes banger. This would have fit perfectly in the middle of the Glow On album. Really dig this one. And then from there, we get into Time Is Happening. This is such a fun song. Some people may disagree with what I'm about to say here, but personally, I hear a lot of Weezer influence in this song. I could totally hear Rivers singing over a more stripped down version of this one. And now we're at the closing track, Magic Man. So definitely an odd closer. This one is pretty much just Brendan Yates with the keyboards and the synths. It's very slow paced. It's weird. It's atmospheric and spacey, but I am guessing that it probably works really well with the visuals in the film. So time will tell on that. Again, can't wait to actually get to see this visual. But overall, I think this album is a fantastic follow-up to what I consider an absolutely perfect album. As I mentioned in the intro of this video, they set the bar pretty high with Glow On, and topping it was pretty much going to be impossible. That said, I think they came pretty dang close to at least matching what they did with that album. Never Enough sees the band pushing the limits of what they did on the last album and getting even more experimental. And I think for the most part, all of that really pays off. Again, I was hoping for the opportunity to experience the visuals, but judging this just on the audio output only, they really captured a vibe throughout this entire album, and it's pretty much impossible to feel anything other than relaxation and joy while you're listening to this album. For my personal taste, there are a few moments where they kind of drag the songs out a little bit too long, in my opinion. This specifically can be felt on the title track as well as on Look Out For Me. But surprisingly, I do not feel the same way about Sunshower, as I actually really dig that flute solo. When stacked up against its predecessor, Never Enough fares pretty well. My only complaint is that where Glow On maintains a consistent momentum throughout, Never Enough has peaks and valleys. And while that is to be expected for an album like this that's more of a concept, it still hurts the overall listening experience just a little. Really just kind of nitpicking though, I think this album is fantastic. It's been on repeat ever since it came out. It seems no matter how much I listen to it, it's never enough. Overall, I give this album a 5 out of 6 upside down pentagrams. Be sure to check out Turnstile's new album, Never Enough, and let us know what you think in the comments.